Well, joining us for our TV Showrunners panel is Billy Ray for the Comey Rule on Showtime. I am Marcus James Dixon of Gold Derby. And Billy, first things first, we have to talk about Brendan Gleeson's amazing performance as Donald Trump. You know, when he was first cast, I'm like, oh, I guess that kind of makes sense. But when I saw it play out on the show, I couldn't believe it. What was your first impression when you saw him do Trump?
Well, it's funny. The first time I ever saw him do Trump was on the set about 3 seconds before the cameras rolled, because Brendan spent most of his time prep in Dublin, and I knew that he was working on the accent with a specialist, but I had never heard it. So the first time I ever heard him do the voice was literally it was as we were setting up the camera to shoot his first scene. And it was one of those moments where everybody on the set looked at each other and thought, okay, we're about to witness something great. Brendan and I had a lot of conversations about Trump. We love Alec Baldwin, but we were not doing a sketch. We were
Yeah.
doing the first dramatic interpretation of Trump ever. And that brought with it a certain level of responsibility. We took that very, very seriously. We didn't want to take any cheap shots. We wanted to just sort of lay Trump out there and let his behavior dictate how you were going to feel about him. And Brendan took that very, very much to heart.
Right. I didn't get like this was a one-sided depiction. I mean, it was literally Trump's own quotes that you were just having Brendan say.
Yes, and
Um,
there were times where while we were shooting, Trump would say something in real life that I would see online or in a newspaper, and I would say that's just got to go in the movie, and I would find a way to rewrite a scene to get that line in there.
Jeff Daniels takes on the role of FBI Director James Comey. What was it about Jeff that made him right for this part? He's done comedy, he's done drama, so he can pretty much do anything.
Well, a number of things. First, you have to be spectacularly talented. He checks that box. Second, you have to bring credibility with you. He certainly checks that box. And, Comey's such a divisive figure. I didn't want an actor that people are sort of split on. I wanted an actor that everybody loved. Third, he needed to have the physical stature to play Comey, who is 6'8", and Jeff is 6'3", which is close enough. But I think the most important thing was, Trump was always going to be the bells and whistles part in this show. I needed an actor to play Comey who was so confident in his own silence that he knew that that silence would have as much power as Trump bouncing off a wall. And Jeff has that. When you see Jeff playing opposite Brendan in the loyalty dinner scene, by the way, you can just sort of see, Brendan has probably 90% of the dialogue in that scene, and yet Comey is as powerful in his stillness as Brendan is with all those bells and whistles. That takes a pretty special actor.
And for those that don't know, this miniseries is based on James Comey's book. Was Comey involved at all in the production? And if not, has he seen it, and what does he think of it?
Comey was involved all the way through prep. I was showing him draft after draft to make sure that I was getting it right. It says something about Comey and his level of integrity. He had about a year and a half to try to manipulate me, to try to, sort of nudge me into portraying him one way or another. He never did. He always resisted that. That shows incredible character on his part. He just treated himself like a resource. When I had a question, he answered it. But, before I'd written a word, I sent him a 150 question long questionnaire about things I needed to know. And he answered everything. I mean, he was just great. The only day he was on the set was, again, the day of the loyalty dinner. I wanted him there. I wanted him to see that. I wanted to make sure that we were getting that one right, because it's sort of the centerpiece of the entire show. It's the closest thing to an action scene as I have in that movie. And it was incredible to have him there, to be shooting that scene where Trump says, I need loyalty, I expect loyalty. And then to be able to look over my left shoulder and see Director Comey and say, did we get this right? And he said, you got it right. You are ruining my day in a great way. This is exactly what I thought. That was pretty rewarding.
And that was my favorite scene by far too, because I was a big watcher of his trial that was going on, the hearings, and when he brought up the dinner and the loyalty pledge, and I was just like, this is insane. Did this really happen? And to see it play out as in my mind, I thought it was really kind of rewarding as a
Well, you know,
as a play.
significantly, it was Jeff and Brendan's first day working together. So,
Okay.
you know, a nerve level of about 100. It was, as I said, a lot of dialogue. On that show, we were shooting about 4 scenes a day because our schedule was nuts. And the only scene that got its own shooting day was the loyalty dinner. It was about 8.5 pages. Plus, as I said, Comey's there. And on top of everything else, right before we started shooting, no time for rehearsal, of course. Right before we started shooting, I said to Jeff and to Brendan, I want to do a lighting trick, so just roll with it. At the top of the scene, the room is fully lit. But once Trump says, I need loyalty, we're going to start to kill the lights behind you, and we're going to start to kill all the lamps behind you. It's about a 5.5 minute effect, so that by the end of the scene, the only light in the room will be the one right above you, so that it seems like you guys are on an island in the middle of very, very dark water. Um, just go with it. And so, on top of all the other nerve factors of that scene, they had a director killing lights around them, and they go out and they give that performance. It was extraordinary work by those two guys.
Was it important for you guys that this aired before the 2020 election? Because I know that I think it moved around the schedule a little bit. It went after, and then it came back to airing before.
It was very important to me. And the whole reason we were shooting it was to air it before the election. Everybody working on the show was doing so with the intention of airing it before the election because we wanted to have some impact on the election. We wanted to present a case to the American people and let them make an informed decision. And that's part of the reason why our schedule was so nuts, was so that we could wrap in time to air before the election. And then we started hearing in March or April that that might no longer be the case. And I fought and fought and fought and lost. And then wrote a letter to my cast saying this was a fight I should have won. I'm not able to win it. And I'm sorry, I let you down. I failed you. And that letter got leaked to the New York Times and created a little bit of a kerfluffle. And Showtime happily changed their mind.
Wow. I'm interested in the framing device you use, where we open with Rod Rosenstein's perspective before going back into the flashbacks and seeing all the Comey stuff play out. Can you talk about that narrative choice that you made?
Sure. That is my open love letter to the movie Amadeus, which is in my top 10 all time. I loved the idea of Salieri telling the story of Mozart, and I thought that that would fit Rod Rosenstein pretty well, since he sort of is Salieri to Comey's Mozart. The idea of having a narrator be someone who hates your main character, that's very tough to resist for me. But the most important thing about it, at least I felt, was people are so divided on Jim Comey, and they have such polar opinions about him. I wanted to be able to say within, a minute of the first frame, I understand you don't all love Jim Comey, and I'm going to let someone who hates Jim Comey be our narrator, just so you know that your point of view is going to be heard. And then let's watch the story together and decide whether or not he's right. I thought Rosenstein delivered a lot on that level. And by the way, without a great actor to pull it off, without Scoot McNairy, that would have been a disaster. Just would have absolutely burned. But Scoot was phenomenal.
And how did you decide on 2 parts? Because you could have done one movie, or you could have done 4 or 5 parts. What made you decide on the 2-night shooting? Not shooting, the production airing.
Well, to tell you the truth, the model there was Jaws. The idea of holding off on the shark, in our case, Trump, for as long as we possibly could, and making that the dividing line between one part of the story and the other. So it seemed to me that a perfect night one close would be the election of Donald Trump. And now our hero is in the water with the shark. Now what are we going to do? And that was a reason to come back and watch night 2. And we tried to distinguish between night 1 and night 2. Night 1 we shot with spherical lenses, and night 2 we shot with anamorphic lenses. There are all kinds of things that we did in terms of lighting so that the world felt differently after Donald Trump had been elected. But this was never in my mind a good idea for a feature. This TV just sort of owns this kind of ground now. I think features have surrendered it to TV, which is a good or a bad thing, but it just exists. And I felt very strongly that a TV audience was the right audience for this.
It's so funny you mentioned Jaws, because Chris Beecham, our managing editor, he said when Trump came on screen, he felt like it became sort of a monster movie. So I
Yeah,
guess
that are.
your plan worked.
Is Trump a monster? I'll let history decide that. But in the case of our story, he certainly is a shark, and James Comey did his best to defend himself against that shark and to defend the apolitical institution that he was responsible for, the FBI, and more broadly justice in America. But he got eaten, and and we were there to tell that story. Donald Trump likes to callously and I think wrongly refer to people as the deep state. The deep
Mm.
state are a group of Americans who care passionately about their country and their democracy and the institutions to make that democracy possible. Jim Comey is certainly one of those people. And I wanted to tell the story about how heartbreaking it could be a public servant in the years of Donald Trump.
Well, Billy, thanks for chatting with us. We will see you in a little bit for the big group panel that we're going to do.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.